Today we're back looking at some true crime cases that will shock you.
People are calling this case the Incest House of Horrors. This case comes with just about the biggest trigger warning for the most horrific things you could hear. It was October 2023 in the quiet Polish village called Koniki. An arrest was about to happen which would shake the small community. The true horrors of what had been going on under everyone's noses were absolutely chilling. Piotr Girasik was 54 years old. He and his wife Hannah had had a staggering 12 children together. Hannah had passed away 15 years prior, leaving Piotr to look after the children on his own. Now, the house that he lived in was far from ideal for such a huge family. Locals were also often concerned about hearing cries and screaming from inside the home. They knew Piotr had a close relationship with his 20-year-old daughter, Paulina, but they had no idea just how disturbing things were getting inside the home. That was until local workers at a cake shop nearby tipped off social services. They had serious concerns about what was going on in the property, and they were right to be worried. When officers arrived at the home, they could smell something absolutely potent. Upon closer inspection of the property, they found decomposing dead babies in the basement. 2 of the tiny bodies were wrapped in plastic bags and one was just lying on the floor. Now, at the time of the discovery, Piotr wasn't actually living in this house with all 12 of his children. Some had escaped. He was living in the house with his daughter Paulina and his disabled son Damien. It would later be revealed that sometimes Damien was seen sat outside the house crying. He told officers that his dad would have S with his sister, so the dad's daughter, and regularly chase Damien out the house and beat him when he wanted to do this. Damien was abused and was given little more than cold rice to live off. Horrifically, police discovered that the deceased babies in the basement were actually the product of incest. The 3 babies found in the cellar were believed to have been killed just after they were born. Frustratingly, Piotr had actually been on the radar of police. He'd been investigated 5 times over allegations of incest. He was arrested finally by police, and his daughter Paulina was also arrested. Thankfully, many of Piotr's children had managed to flee, and his one daughter, Kasia, referred to him as a monster. He's now facing charges of murder, incest, and R.
Okay, good, and I hope he never ever leaves jail. How can someone be so evil? You know, whenever I watch these videos, they really are shocking, aren't they? It's the fact that this isn't fiction, this actually happened. I was hoping the first photo wasn't what I thought it is. Okay, so I read into the comments, and apparently he posts bizarre pictures like that on his Facebook. I don't know what the brown stuff in her face is. I'm hoping it's chocolate, I'm hoping it's not feces. If the daughter was subjected to this abuse and was afraid to leave or fight back, does she deserve arrest? A lot of people in the comment section were having a massive debate about this, because 50% of people were saying that she shouldn't be charged, the other half were saying she should be. And honestly, I don't know, it's one of them difficult situations. None of us know exactly what she went through. But was she involved with them children dying? Why didn't she alert the police, etc.? But then on the flip side, if she was controlled by him, you know, she can't really do anything. I just hope she gets therapy, because having to deal with a monster like that would literally scar you.
This Jane Doe's identity would not be revealed for 34 years, and to this day, no one knows exactly what happened to her. So have you ever heard of the Bossier Jane Doe? In December of 1981, this man, John Chesham, decided to take his 2 boys hunting for the very first time in Bossier Parish, Louisiana. He sent his 2 sons in a direction, and soon they came back screaming, saying that they had found a body.
Oh no.
The body was in a severe state of decomposition, but the body did have several pieces of clothes that might help in identifying, including this belt buckle. But despite this, there was still no one who would claim Jane Doe. Police then decided to go to the next step and make a composite sketch of what the victim could have possibly looked like. But again, this would lead to absolutely nothing. Then, several years after Jane Doe was found, Henry Lucas, an infamous serial killer, would come forward and say that he was responsible for the passing of Jane Doe. But after investigating further, the police were able to find out that this was in fact not true.
That's quite a common thing, isn't it, where serial killers will claim responsibility for a crime they didn't commit. But why though? It makes you think, why? Obviously there were serial killers that have killed people. Why did he claim responsibility for other murders? Unless he genuinely believes he did murder her and he got her mixed up with another woman.
But with him admitting to this case, it sparked new interest in the Bossier Jane Doe's case. But again, the case would kind of go cold until 2015, when the investigator on the case decided to take this to social media to see if maybe they could find identity for Jane Doe. They decided to make a Facebook profile like any normal person would, where you had to friend this person and then they would put on their ways to identify her. And it was by coincidence that this would lead to the identity of Jane Doe. A dispatcher in Louisiana who was homesick was just kind of browsing the internet when she stumbled upon this Facebook profile. As luck would have it, she was also browsing Craigslist, and it was through there that she saw another ad of a missing woman from Michigan. She thought that they looked similar and decided to contact police with this information. Carol Ann Cole lived with her grandmother and her sister in Kalamazoo, Michigan before 1980 when she decided to move to Austin, Texas to live with her mom. While she was in Austin, she started hanging out with a pretty rough crowd and started getting involved in some adult substances, illegal substances, and this kind of led her down a bad path. Her mother decided to put her in like a rehab facility, and it was actually Carol who decided that she didn't want to be there and left. Now, she would travel around kind of hitchhiking all over the place, but she would call in and check in with her family and write letters regularly. In December of 1980, Carol Ann just stopped calling and writing to her family, but last they knew she was in Louisiana. So after getting in touch with the investigator who had created the Facebook page, her family gave DNA, and this is how they found out that the identity of the Bossier Jane Doe was in fact Carol Ann Cole. Investigators did follow several leads of her last known whereabouts, and she had gone to a party, but again, these leads really ran cold and there was nothing to find.
It was from 40 years ago, to be fair.
But police went back to John, the guy who took his kids hunting, and then they found the body. There was something suspicious about him because he had never taken his sons hunting before, and then he just magically pointed them in the direction of the body. On top of that, his daughter says that she remembers a girl at their house. One day she came home and there was a girl at their house who had hitchhiked there, and she went to school a couple of days later, and when she came back, this girl was gone, but all of her belongings were still there. She would also tell police that John was an absolute monster, that he was just absolutely terrible to his kids. And even more of a weird fact, 16 years after the Bossier Jane Doe was found, John was sentenced to prison after taking the life of another woman by stabbing. I forgot to mention that the Bossier Jane Doe had lost her life due to stabbing. But once again, these leads would never pan out, and to this day, no one really knows what happened to Carol Ann Cole. But John did stay in prison and eventually passed away there. So what are your thoughts on this case? Do you think that John is responsible and the secret just passed away with him, or do you think that there could be another side to this story?
I feel like we've unofficially solved that case. Like, I did not realize he had murdered another woman. You know, that's a big detail you left out. Let me get this straight. This girl was hitchhiking, she was in his house, and then mysteriously just disappeared according to the daughter. And then randomly one day he took his sons hunting, which he never done, and they came across a dead woman. I mean, it sounds like he's responsible for it. Those sketches are scary. I mean, look, I understand the whole point of sketches. It's to try to help find someone, but they really are terrifying. These cases are creepy, but the sketches are even worse. So the police didn't look into the guy that found the body. This seems like pretty basic detective work. That's what I say all the time about these cases. Like, the detectives make so many dumb mistakes that they shouldn't be making. Surely everything gets recorded in records. So like, if that guy found a dead body and then 16 years later murdered somebody, you'd think that would be a wee bit of a clue, wouldn't you?
This is by far one of the scariest unsolved murders. Let's talk about it. This is Russell and Shirley Dermond. They were married for 64 years and went on to have 4 kids together. They were living in a nice house in a gated community on Lake Oconee in Putnam County, Georgia, and they were really enjoying their peaceful retired life. They were extremely loved by the community, but on May 6, 2014, their lives would tragically end. Russell and Shirley were last seen alive on May 1st running some errands in Eatonton, and they last spoke to their son later that same day on the phone. A few days later on May 3rd, the couple was supposed to attend a party with their neighbors for the 2014 Kentucky Derby, but they never showed up. 3 more days would pass with no word from the Dermonds, and their neighbors became became so worried that they went to their house to check on them. When they arrived, they found that the front door was unlocked, so they let themselves in. Everything inside the house seemed perfectly fine, but when the neighbor entered the garage, they found Russell's decapitated body lying in a pool of blood surrounded by towels. They obviously called 911 immediately because of the horrific scene, and when police arrived, they quickly realized that Shirley was missing. Police initially thought that Shirley had been kidnapped, so a massive search was launched. But sadly, 10 days later, Shirley's decomposed body was found floating in Lake Oconee by a couple of fishermen. She had initially been weighed down by two 30-pound concrete blocks. According to the autopsy, Shirley died from 2 or 3 deep wounds to the head from a blunt object. Authorities initially believed that the murder stemmed from a robbery, but there were no signs of a break-in and nothing was taken from their home. Hundreds of tips and leads started pouring in, but to this day, the case remains unsolved. And the most horrifying part is that Russell's head has never been found. According to reports, gunshot residue was found on his collar, leading authorities to believe that he was decapitated after being shot in the head in order to stop police from finding the bullet. Over the years, people have speculated that the Dermans' deaths were related to their oldest son, Mark. Mark was killed in Atlanta in 2000 during a drug dispute, but police strongly believe that there is no connection. What makes this case so confusing is that there's still so many unanswered questions. Police still don't know whether or not the killer entered through the front gate of the community or if they had access to the back of the house by boat, but they do believe that multiple people were involved. Police also believe that the towels surrounding Russell's decapitated body were placed there to stop his blood from seeping out underneath the garage door. And as far as the concrete blocks tied to Shirley's body, investigators said that a professional would know that that wouldn't work. So the question remains on who would do this and why. According to police, new DNA evidence and cell phone data was discovered last year that they are hoping will lead to the people responsible, but they don't know if it's enough DNA evidence to be run through CODIS or if it even belongs to the killer. At this point, it could still just belong to Russell and Shirley. Investigators are using new technology to analyze the recent cell phone data found that wasn't existent in 2014, so they remain hopeful. But it's now been 10 years, and whoever killed Russell and Shirley and took his head is still out there.
Yeah, and that is absolutely terrifying. First of all, it's absolutely heart-wrenching if that happened to that couple. It's the fact that the killer's still out there. Someone has committed that crime and they've not been arrested. They're literally out in the world. Like, who's done that? Shirley had that killer smile. Okay, so we just watched a TikTok about an old couple who literally got murdered, and that person has to say that. I think it's so crazy to think about how the strangers we pass by every day could be heinous killers. I think about that all the time. You know, whenever you pass someone, you don't know what that person's like. They could be an angel, they could be the best person ever, or they could be a sadistic killer. They could have a fake identity. You don't know what they've been doing. But I think what's so terrifying is the fact that someone's went in, done that, and then they've just never been found. Could it maybe be gang related? I mean, put it this way, gangs aren't all gangsters. A lot of times it's all smoke and mirrors. Biggest gangsters are the people you don't expect, aka old people.
This elderly couple would be stalked and terrorized for years by someone who has never been caught. Bill and Dorothy Wacker lived a quiet life in Stark County, Ohio, but in 1984, that would all change. Over the course of that year, their home was broken into twice, and finally for a third time on January 16, 1985. This is when Bill decided to get the police involved. 6 months later, Dorothy was home alone recovering from a heart surgery when someone knocked on the door. When she opened the door, a man was standing there who said that his car had broken down and he had asked to use her phone. Although she couldn't see his car, she agreed and let him come inside. After a few minutes went by, Dorothy thought the man left, but he was actually hiding inside of her house and attacked her from behind, knocking her out after hitting her in the back of the head. She woke up, bound and gagged on the kitchen floor with the man nowhere to be found. She was able to crawl to the window and alerted the neighbors, who called 911. Luckily, she was okay, but when Bill was inspecting the home, he noticed that a few items had been stolen, such as a gun, an antique watch, a radio scanner, and a video camera. He also noticed that written in crayon on the kitchen wall read, quote, "cheaper, but will do," end quote. 4 months later, Bill awoke to find his gun wrapped in a plastic bag on his front porch, and over the course of time, the other items that were stolen were also returned in an odd manner. This is when the harassment got really bad. The stalker began calling the Wackers non-stop, either threatening them or just being really creepy and breathing heavily into the phone. It got so bad that they changed their number multiple times, but the stalker always ended up getting their new phone number. Then it escalated even further. The Wackers began waking up in the middle of the night to loud banging and pounding on the side of their house, but when they investigated, they could never find anyone. They set up security lights to try and catch the person responsible, but that didn't work, and instead they woke to a note saying, quote, "Your lights are a laugh," end quote. Multiple threatening and really creepy notes started to show up on their doorstep, but authorities could never find any fingerprints.
Ew.
In October of 1993, Dorothy was attacked again in her home, and this time her injuries were so bad that she had multiple skull fractures. Police investigated the assault, however, they had absolutely zero leads. The whackers were so terrified that they decided to stake out their own home with other family members, but after not seeing anything, they ended the stakeout at around 11 p.m. Not long after, they heard someone outside, and when they opened the door, they found another note that read, "Get the message." Dorothy helped create this composite sketch of the man who first attacked her. However, this person has never been caught, and to this day, this case remains unsolved. And sadly, both Bill and Dorothy have since passed away without ever knowing who was responsible.
I mean, I'm still alive and I want to know who was doing that. What nutcase was harassing that old couple? Yet again, what is wrong with humans? Like, who in their right mind does that? And why are they still living in the house? What have they done to be treated like that? Like, no one deserves that. Reminds me of The Watcher, but escalated. Oh my god, The Watcher's on Netflix, isn't it? I couldn't watch that. Like, I get so freaked out about that stuff. I hate the whole jump scare thing. But their reality was literally the Netflix thing. Like, that is terrifying. It sounds like someone who may have been distantly close to them in some way was somehow in the loop. But she didn't recognize him. The man who allegedly knocked her out, like, she didn't recognize him, unless it was someone in the loop who absolutely hated and despised him for some reason, and they paid someone to act like that. But that is just terrifying, the fact that like they went through hell like that for years, nearly died multiple times, and then the person was never caught. And yet again, we're gonna go back to the whole thing of people committing these crimes, doing these things, and then never getting caught. Somebody in this world was responsible for that, and they know it. Well, anyways, guys, that's really a video there. That's some creepy true crime cases. If you see me look at more creepy videos like this, let me know definitely well. Subscribe and see you all tomorrow for another video.